The spotter's role is multi. You wear a lot of hats, a lot of different hats, and in a lot of ways, we're like air traffic control. In my headset alone, I've got one channel that's to Jeb, is how I communicate with him, and then I've got a second speaker in my headset that's just me and the crew chief, so I can actually talk to Jeb and the crew chief basically simultaneously.
All right, what is up, everybody? Got a fun one. Jim to my right, as per usual these days. Jim, always good to have you here. Across from us virtually, we have Jeb Burton. Now, if you're into racing, if you're into NASCAR, that's probably a very, very familiar name, a very storied family history. It's a family affair in the Burton world, so that's probably, like I said, that's not one you haven't heard before. Across from us also, we have Mike Herman, who works with Jeb. Now, Jeb is a NASCAR driver. Mike is a NASCAR spotter. Mm-hmm. So today, together, collectively, we're going to talk about NASCAR in general and how cool it is and some of its intricacies. We're going to talk about a little bit about Jeb's story in the racing world, and also that spotter driver relationship. Because I think a lot of times when people think about racing, Jim, optics. See how I'm weaving optics into this thing?
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Optics, you're tracking. There's a pun for you. Might not be the first thing a person thinks of, but these guys are using them at times. So we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. So, gentlemen, welcome. It is awesome to have you here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me and Mike. Me and Mike actually, this is our first year working together. Me and him have been around the garage a long time, but he's been around the garage a lot longer than me. But we're happy to be on here.
Right on. So your first year working together, then officially kind of as like the spotter driver sort of thing that you guys have going on there. You probably have to build up. I mean, like you said, you've gotten to know each other for a longer period of time, maybe than that. But you got to have a lot of communication skills and kind of trust and understanding between each other. If a guy like Mike is going to be giving you all that valuable information on the track, right?
Yeah, for sure. Some of the tracks that's really valuable is Daytona and Talladega. I'll let Mike explain in a minute, but those tracks, he's constantly nonstop in my ear because we're 3 or 4 wide the whole time. So those are the tracks that I'm really, really relying on him to get me to the front.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man.
Real quick, Jeb, just so we can provide a little bit of a context or a framework, if you can, give us, man, like I said, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of history. So maybe if you've got like a quick and dirty version of like your racing history and just kind of, what you got going on and kind of where you're at now, and then we'll start there. And also, I think we'll probably hit on your outdoor background a little bit because you got a hunting TV show too, which also uses optics. So.
Yeah, for sure. I started racing at a younger age. Should have started a little bit younger than I did, but I wanted to be a kid, and I didn't really start racing go-karts till I was 12 years old, and that's kind of a late start, believe it or not. I raced motocross before that when I was about 9 years old, and just was around the sport my whole life, and started racing late models, and then went to the truck series, and did a year of the Cup Series, and now I'm in the Xfinity Series, and I'm with a up and coming team now, Our Motorsports, and we're trying to build that team right now. We're a little behind in some areas, so we're working really hard to try to close that gap. We're a top 15 team right now, but we're trying to close that big gap to the big team so we can be more competitive every week. But and then we also got the Crossroads with the Burtons hunting show. We're always doing something in the outdoors. Dad, had me as a little kid hunting and fishing with him, and I just fell in love with it. And when I'm not racing, I'm always on the farm. So it's a good hobby to have, and I like to do it a lot.
Heck yeah.
Awesome.
That was, you distilled about, many, many years down very tightly there. So
yeah, that was actually pretty good.
That was awesome. Mike, what about you? So, I don't think you probably become a spotter without at least a racing background. Like you said, you and Jeb been around the track for a while now. What's your story? How did you get to where you're at today? I see some trophies in the background too.
Yeah, I got a few trophies around the shop here, but my background, I'm a little bit older than Jeb, so my background goes back way further. But I started racing myself back in 1983, but started out in go-karts. But even before that, I come from a racing family. My dad was a flat track motorcycle racer in the 60s. And then, I live in Kannapolis, North Carolina, born and bred, bought the house next door to my parents. I'm on the same street. The Earnhardt family shop was only like a mile down the road. And, my dad got to be friends with Ralph Earnhardt, and Ralph helped him port heads on his motorcycle motors and things like that around town. And then when Dale come along, he started helping Dale on his race car stuff in the mid to late 70s. And he continued that on until my racing got to be so busy around 1986 that he had to back away from that to focus on my deal. So, my background goes back to that. So basically, I'm an Earnhardt kid from Kannapolis that grew up over on Sedan Avenue on summer nights, hanging out in the shop over there and getting to go to the racetrack. And, I tell people all the time that, when I first got to go to Victory Lane with Earnhardt in a Busch race, I was 7 or 8 years old, and you look over and you see Superman standing there, and you kind of know that's, your fate's kind of sealed. You know what you're going to do. And, so I wanted to be a driver myself, and started short track racing in 1992, and started racing at Hickory Motor Speedway. And, me and Jeb's got similar backgrounds. We're both late model stock car guys. So, I went on to move down to my home track in Concord, which is no longer here, but fortunate enough to win 2 track championships there in the NASCAR late model stock car. And then started traveling with a touring division called the Hooters Pro Cup Series, which back in its day was real similar to the Busch National Series, but we were focused all on short track racing. And, so I ended up, driving myself for around 17 years. And before, just like with everything else, funding goes one way or the other. And the housing bubble busted in 2008. So that's when I switched over to spotting. And my spotter for the longest time was Chris Lambert, who spots for Denny Hamlin now on the 11 Cup car. And that was my eye opener right there to know that might be my next path outside of driving.
Man,
that's awesome. And I imagine, all that driving experience really plays into like knowing exactly what you're looking for. Like, what the driver, you have that perspective, and what he needs and what information that he's going to need from you. And obviously you're able to see that and spot it and provide it.
It does. I use my driving experience all the time. And, the biggest way that I do that is I literally put myself into his shoes from his perspective. It's kind of like an outer body experience when you're spotting. You're not really looking from the view high above. I'm kind of hovering over top, you know what I mean? And looking through what his eyes are seeing, and what he can't see is one of the biggest things that I focus on. So I use my driving experience every day.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, for there's probably people listening here right now that are maybe interested in driving and racing, or, maybe even not, but they're curious about this, and they see NASCAR on TV, and, it's cars going real fast, turning left, and they're going in an oval. They do a lot of laps, and it's easy to kind of focus on the car and the driver, but there's a lot going on. There's so much, and I don't have personally a whole lot of racing knowledge, but what I do know is that, you've got a huge team behind the driver themselves, and they're paying attention to so many things that are happening that nobody really, just who, unless they're really into the sport, has any idea is actually happening. And so other than you, Mike, and Jeb/Mike, you guys can go into this. Who all is on the team? Like, what all roles are being filled throughout the duration of a race? Besides, obviously, who we've got here, a driver and a spotter. What all is going on?
Well, I think we both can touch on this. It just depends on what organization you're with, right? Rick Hendrick and Joe Gibbs Racing and a bunch of other teams, they've got 500 to 600 employees working. I mean, it takes a lot to put these race cars on the racetrack. So it's a lot of moving parts. But at the track, you know, you've got your mechanics, you got your engine tuner, obviously Mike, my spotter, you got your pit crew, your crew chief, your car chief, your interior specialist. So those are kind of your hitters at the track.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've got a hauler there most of the time with a backup car in it, just in case something happened in practice and qualifying, we can get that thing ready to go. So we've really got a moving workshop with the hauler there. We've got spare engines and all kind of things accessible to us. So it's a lot of moving parts that I think people just have no idea of. And then the other thing is the resources with these race teams. You know, the best race teams it's not a coincidence. Those are the guys that are winning the races, right? They got the best drivers, but they also got the best equipment. And that comes from funding, and it also comes from people. People make, you know, Vortex optics great, right? If you didn't have the people building the products and selling the products, y'all wouldn't be able to do what you do. So it all comes down to having the best people and the funding and then putting it all together and executing.
Yeah. One thing, and I don't want to go off topic here too much, Mark, but
no, I like it.
I'm going to have to ask my nerdy questions because I do have somewhat of an enthusiast interest here. One thing I've always been curious about in racing, so people bring up things, you know, like funding, for example, and having the best equipment in order to win. One thing I've always been kind of curious about is that there's a lot of regulations to the car, for example, and a lot of the equipment and things around the car. You can't just go out with anything. It's not like some open division where you just get to race whatever you want. So when you're playing within those specifications, how is it that somebody can have a better piece of equipment or, like, you know, more funding can get poured into something to make it better when there's also so many rules that try to make everything pretty similar?
So a couple of things. One, it's coming from, for example, wind tunnel. You know, the best teams are going to the wind tunnel. So underneath of those cars is downforce.
Yeah.
So whoever's finding the right angles of the front pan to building the way the all the underneath is that's downforce, and that equals grip. That is technology going into even with the tires, the tire data, knowing what air pressure they need to run. The big teams have those resources. We have simulators where the engineers will go in, put the setup in, and go to the simulator and try that setup. My team does not have, we don't have that capability to do that. So we're racing against guys that do, and we're dealing with tenths of a second, right? I'm not a second off at a racetrack. We're dealing with 3 or 4 tenths at a mile and a half. So after a couple laps, that's a big gap, but it's not like we're, you know, a couple tenths and Mike in my eyes is huge, but to you guys, it's not a lot. But it is a lot. So it's just money and resources and technology, like I'm talking about, that the engineers are doing and the big teams are doing, and figuring out ways to make grip and make the car turn without being loose. And it's just resources that make you go fast.
Yeah, in the areas where you do have some leeway within the rules to kind of change some stuff. Got it.
Oh, yeah. And look, every team's doing it different, right?
Yeah.
You know, the 5 team in Cup last year, they figured it out, and they were unbeatable. They were pretty amazing. I think they won like 10 races or something in the Cup Series, and that's getting it done. So,
man, that's wild.
Yeah, I mean, everything's got to be clicking, but everybody's doing something to try to get a leg up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Could you also go into the difference between, because you mentioned Cup Series and you're in the Xfinity Series, and I know you were in the Truck Series too. Can you go into the differences between, kind of like, if you're in NASCAR, what these different series mean?
Yeah, so the Truck Series is obviously a totally different body. It's a different kind of chassis. It's a truck. The speed's totally different. They're a lot easier to drive. They have more downforce. So they're kind of, you know, when you have downforce, you're compressed into the track. So a lot of the tracks, they just hold it wide open until they get into the race. And then the thing about a truck, they put such a big hole in the air. When you're behind somebody, you can get really aero tight, and then you'll slide up the hill. So you really have to maneuver your way around to get through traffic with a truck. And an Xfinity car right now is a handful to drive. We've got small spoiler on the back, a lot of horsepower. The tires fall off. So
that can be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're just wearing the tires out, and you just don't have a lot of grip.
And you've got a short. I'm sorry to interrupt. You got a shorter wheelbase than the Cup cars too, right?
Mike, you would probably know that. I hadn't kept up with that. I know they're totally different now on the wheelbase.
Yeah, a few years ago they actually went to the same, where you could, where the wheelbase was actually the same, where the Cup car used to be 5 inches longer on a wheelbase. Now, as far as the next gen car that we're racing in Cup now, I don't know where they settled on the wheelbase for that, but I mean, you bring up a good point about the wheelbase, because wheelbase is one thing underneath the race car, but the race car is infinitely adjustable, to a thousandth of an inch on all kinds of adjustments, and that's where your differences in speed comes from, because there's just there's a thousands of different ways to set these cars up, and that's where the people and the crew chiefs and engineers come into at a very important role to choose what we're going to go to the racetrack with.
I mean, guys, we're dealing with, so the track bar is on the rear of the car, on the rear end. If you move that track bar up a half an inch, it makes a heck of a difference. Mm-hmm. Like, we're talking that. So that's just one component. We've got all kind of different things you can change. So
yeah,
the engineers on their laptop are putting these setups in, and they've got the track, they've got it. I mean, this is, man, it's way over my head. I used to try to keep up with the setups, and man, I like this and like that. It's got so crazy now. I mean, the springs are running, the things we're doing. I just tell them what the car's doing. I let them figure it out. Yeah. I mean, it's way over just us racing late model stock and getting out and changing the spring and making the car go faster. It is, technology is taking over.
Crazy.
You're talking about, all these different things that you adjust. And so it's like, man, let's say you get it set up. You're like, oh man, this thing is dialed. It's rocking. But does that all start over when you go to a different track because you need the car to do different things?
Well, to be honest, a lot of these mile and a halves, when you get a really good baseline, you have to change a couple things, but you're in the ball game.
Okay.
Once you find that, you're going to be hard to beat every week. And that's coming from a bunch of things. The setup, yeah, but the downforce and just everything that team has is working, and it's hard to beat when you find that.
For those maybe less familiar with like NASCAR, can you just go through like maybe like the I guess the race format, like kind of the stages of the race a little bit?
Yeah, so our race format, starting with a kind of a new format, we have a quick practice session. Usually on for the Xfinity Series, it could be the day of our race, or it could be the day before. And where we used to have a lot of time in between practice and qualifying, now we roll right into qualifying. So basically in the Xfinity Series, you get one lap by yourself, and that sets the lineup in the field. So that's going to determine our starting position. And then our race is actually broke into 3 different stages. Stage 1 and stage 2 are typically around 25% each of the race. And then the final stage is half the race. At each stage break, which ultimately was built in for TV timeouts. It's an opportunity for our television partners to go to commercial break without missing on-track action. But we have something to race for there, because those stages pay points towards our year-long championship, and ultimately you want to win a stage, because that pays a playoff point that carries over all the way through the playoffs, which is very valuable. And then once we get into the final stage, it turns into more of a traditional type race, to where if the race runs green, you can see us make a green flag pit stop, or, there could be a bunch of cautions that keeps us bunched up. But, racing's a pretty simple sport when it comes down to it, because, when they throw the green flag, whoever completes all the laps to the checker flag in the shortest amount of time wins the race. So it's just there's a lot of different ways to be able to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, there's and so, you know, what we're getting at here by having both of you guys on the podcast is sort of what all is happening during that race between you two. So I guess, you know, Mike, I'm curious, when Jeb's out there racing, and maybe it's even different across the whole length of the race. But what kinds of stuff are you looking for as the spotter? I mean, we'll start there, and I'm sure there's a 1,000 questions we can ask as we go.
Yeah, you know, the spotter's role is multi. You wear a lot of hats, a lot of different hats, and you know, in a lot of ways, we're like air traffic control. You know, I've you know, in my headset alone, I've got one channel that's to Jeb, is how I communicate with him, and then I've got a second speaker in my headset that's just me and the crew chief, so I can actually talk to Jeb and the crew chief basically simultaneously. And then I have another one that is NASCAR. So that's kind of the air traffic control. So I'm the liaison between NASCAR, race control, and our team. So the spotter helps the flow of the race, making sure, you know, that we're passing along any directives, or whether it be the lineup or cautions or penalties, you know, different things like that. So, you know, I'm wearing that hat. And then, you know, with the crew chief, he primarily talks to me. So that way my line of communication to Jeb stays open, because my number one role is safety. You know, I'm looking ahead further than he can, you know, for accidents on the racetrack, to be able to, you know, help us get through that without any kind of damage or getting wrecked ourselves. So safety is the number one component. The third component's, you know, probably the most intriguing or the fun part is, you know, we're like, I consider like the spotter's role, if you're going to compare it to other sports out there, we're like a mix between the offensive and defensive coordinator in football, or even if you're a golf fan, if you watch PGA golf, the caddy's kind of that guy that's behind the scenes, you know, with those pro golfers that are very intricate in the choices that the golfer he makes himself. And that's one thing that, you know, the fans of golf don't see that a whole lot in that communication, but it's real similar to what we do.
Right on. So, like, what are some examples? So we'll talk kind of the safety side of things first. What are some examples of, like, safety items that aren't a full-on, let's say, like, giant crash, or something where they're pulling out the caution flags and all that? But, like, are there other examples of things you're looking for where, you know, maybe there's a slick spot on the track, or something you've noticed? What kind of things do you see there?
And that could be anything. I mean, it could be, I mean, for example, we'll have cars put oil down on the racetrack, and race control doesn't deem it to be hazardous enough, but it might warrant us switching lanes. You know, that oil might be on the bottom of the racetrack, and we've been running the bottom. So if I can relay that information to him to switch lanes, then it's going to keep us from, and it might not even be from wrecking. It might just be hurting our lap times, because I'm constantly watching his lap times and comparing that to usually the person in front of us, because that's the rabbit that we're chasing. But we're also chasing the leader at the same time. So you got multiple races going on at one time, because you're trying to earn as many positions forward as you can. But you're also wanting to make sure you're keeping pace with the leader, because you want to stay on the same lap as him. You know, you never want to go a lap down, because it just kind of push into a hole that you got to dig out of. And, you know, there could be guys that hit the wall and have damage that could possibly be about to cut a tire down, you know, so we want to be able to avoid that type of stuff. So I'm up above looking at it from a broad perspective, because he's literally, from a safety standpoint, he's sitting in a cocoon. So his vision is limited, almost like a racehorse with blinders on, you know, because he's sitting in a cocoon for his own safety. So he's limited on what he can see. He's primarily looking straight ahead with a narrow field of view, where I look at things from a wide field of view.
Yeah, where are you located, Mike? Like, do you have like a bird's eye view? Are you down on the track? Where are you at?
Yeah, usually we're around the center of the racetrack, which would be start finish line on the front straightaway, high above, whatever the highest point is in a racetrack, and that's usually either above the VIP suites or it could be above race control. But we're always on the roof of the racetrack. So, if you just look all the way up from the grandstands, all the way above, VIP suites and race control, you'll usually find us standing outside in the elements up top.
Wow. Now, so you did bring up kind of the strategy, if you will, side of things, that coordinator, that caddy. Well, I kind of like that analogy there. But what kinds of stuff? I mean, again, this is another thing. If you're just sort of like, I clicked on the TV, NASCAR is on, and I don't watch it all that often, you're going to see cars driving around, and it seems kind of like, hey, those guys for however many 100 laps are just going balls to the wall, foot to the floor, like straight up. And maybe that is what you're doing, but also I feel like there's kind of an element sometimes where you kind of got to like, let's push now. Let's chill out a little bit here, settle in behind that guy. Like, is there stuff like that going on? How do you navigate all that? What do what's the, don't tell us the secret sauce, maybe if you got some secret sauce, but what kind of are you doing generally?
Yeah, Jeb can speak on that one probably more so than me, but we're just you're always comparing yourself to around the guys that you're racing, and Jeb, you can tell us more about how you see and handle that.
Yeah, I think like this past weekend, for example, we didn't have the fastest car, and our car fell off really bad, like the last 20 laps of the run. So my right front tire was giving out, and I thought we needed to short pit. So when I say short pit, we pit under green, and we pit and we get tires and we go back on the track, and I'm going to make up a lot of time because I'm the only guy on the track with new tires. So that's one of the things that you can do. I mean, there's fuel mileage things that come into play. Another thing for us, normally right now we're about that 17th to 12th mark. That's kind of where we are right now. And if we can't get stage points, what I'm thinking we should do, if a caution comes out with 6 or 7 laps to go in the stage, pit then. So when the stage ends, all the good cars will pit and we'll be ahead of them all, so we get better track position. So there's all kind of things that you're doing like that in the race, and put yourself in the best situation for the last restart of the race. Like this past weekend, I was running 11th on the track, but we had a pit road penalty under green, so I had to come back down pit road, and we lost another lap. So it killed our end result. We should have finished about 12th at least. But we didn't because we had a pit road penalty under green flag, and I had to come back down pit road. So it's really a team sport. If I make a mistake, everybody's got to fix the car. I mean, I destroyed it, right? If the pit crew screws up on pit road, I'm paying the consequence, and they are too, because it killed our race last week. So we're all in it together. And Mike can make mistakes too if he clears me and I'm not clear, but I try not to blame a spotter because I do have some mirrors, right? But I am using him. So
sure,
him and I have to be on the same page. So when he says go, I don't just look, I go. And that's been a difficult thing for me because I like to clear myself before I go. But at those places like Daytona and Talladega, you don't have time to do that. You just have to move.
Yeah.
Especially when you're leading the race and controlling the lanes, you just got to go.
I think I do remember from Driver's Ed, Jim. It's mirror signal head check, right? That's what you guys are doing out there.
I'm kidding.
I'm kidding.
I try to get my mirrors where I don't have to look. So if I'm right here driving, I can just do that. I can see what I can see, and then my left side mirror I can see.
Oh yeah, you don't have to move your whole head.
Yeah, you don't want to be doing that because it just takes more time. So that stuff's important.
What do you, Jeb, like when you're in the car driving on track? You've got some people in your ear. And I'm sure that they are either feeding you information, or I would venture to guess at times they're requesting information from you. And then you're also going like 180 miles an hour with a bunch of other cars around you too on a track. I mean, it's like not easy stuff happening, and a lot of it happening all at once.
A lot of input.
lot of input and a lot of things happening quickly.
I'll tell you, it's a lot of frustration that happens too.
Frustration. Okay. All right. Well, I'm curious, like, what do you ever even find yourself focused on one thing, or is it really just a matter of constantly trying to juggle a lot of things? You know, like, are you kind of, I know in some, what was it? I can't remember what sport we were talking about where there was kind of like a spotter and then athlete, whatever it was, relationship. And the athlete was required so, why can't I remember what sport it was? Anyway, they were required so much to like do things quickly that they almost didn't even necessarily see things for themselves. They were just going off of what the spotter would say. And like, do you find yourself more like going off of and reacting things to things that you're hearing through your headset, or are you primarily reacting to things that you're seeing and then having to kind of like, oh yeah, they're mumbling in the background?
A little bit of both. Like this past weekend, I was making some good moves on restarts. I'm listening to what Mike's saying, but I'm, if he's like, hey, go through this whole, at the end of the day, I'm holding the wheel, right? So yeah. I'm kind of thinking about what I'm going to do and look ahead before I do it. I feel like where Mike can help me is avoiding people on the track I don't need to be around, people wrecking, and then especially when I'm clear, when I'm not clear, who's coming, what he's seeing with different lines and things of that nature, giving me lap times. Those are the things that I really like. One thing that I really like that he does is I'll be chasing a guy, right? And he's giving me that guy's lap time and my lap time, and then sometimes the guy behind me. So I kind of know everything that's going on. And if my car's not doing what I need it to do, and the guy's faster than me, that kind of gets frustrating, right? And this past weekend, I was racing around a guy that was about this close to my right side door. And when that happens, getting into the corner, it makes you loose because it takes all the side force away.
Yeah.
So he's pretty much about to wreck you, right? And end your day. So I wasn't very happy with him. And I, said some things, and Mike kind of brings me back down to, it's a lot of adrenaline going there. Y'all should listen this weekend. You can get on your phone on the NASCAR app and you can listen to the whole radio communication with me and Mike, the crew chief. You can hear it all, and you can see how, it does this throughout the race, and you want to be even keel, but it's a lot riding on that. You got your sponsors, yourself, a lot of people paying you to do a good job. So, you got a lot invested in this, and it means something. So that's where the frustration can come from. It's the most frustrating, fun thing I've ever done in my life. It's been I've had the worst days of my life because of racing and the best ones. Like, that's just what it is.
That's saying something because you hunt as well. And I feel like that, at least for me, in my world and the activities that I do, it's like it is the most fun and frustrating thing.
Like if say you went on an elk hunt and you spent all this time, all this money, and you practice, and you wounded that animal. You know how bad you would feel? Like how bad you feel? I mean, that's a bad feeling because I've done it. That's what it feels like when you go out there and crash. I mean, it and ruin your day and ruin it for everybody. You lose points. I mean, it's a bad deal. But you got to learn to get out of that because it's the next week and put your boots back on and go do it again.
Yep. You guys were talking about like making a move, right? And it's like you guys have very different perspectives. Like Mike said, Jeb, you're down there, in the trenches, in a cocoon with you can see and you're making decisions based on what you're seeing. Mike has a very different view. Like you were talking about how, hey, if he says go, but what things are both of you, and maybe I'll start with you, Jeb, but what are you looking for that's an indicator that you're like, oh, I can make a move now? Because when I watch NASCAR, I'm a complete neophyte when it comes to what's going on there. I don't know. Everything seems so subtle, and then all of a sudden somebody's doing something, and I don't even know why that person, why then?
Right.
A lot of it's instinct. I mean, from side drafting to doing stuff like that. The places that Mike, his role is very important every week, but the places that he can make a huge difference is Daytona and Talladega. This last time at Daytona, we have tear-offs on our windshield, right? Like on the windshield, we have like 6 tear-offs. So every pit stop, they'll tear a sheet off, right? So we can see, because so much debris and stuff's coming through, it gets foggy and all messed up. So we actually had one rip off with like 25 laps to go. I'm 3 wide in the middle, so 6 rows deep, and Mike is constantly talking, the whole time, talking. Well, that happened. It ripped the antenna off the roof of the car, and my radio went down to like 0, and I turned the radio all the way up, and I had it in one ear. So it was better than nothing, but I was thinking to myself, this is going to suck these last 20 laps without having him. I mean, it would have been bad. I got my mirrors right, but I would have been more focused here than there and not be able to make the moves that he's seeing to go do. I mean, for example, I can't see what's in front of me. If I'm tucked underneath a guy like this, I can't see necessarily what's in front of him. He could say, dude, you need to ditch this guy, get up top, the top's coming. I can't see that. So that's where he is really, really important.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. What you're talking about feel too, like how much does feel come into play when you're going to make a move? Like you were talking about, even that car being next to you and affecting the way your car was driving. What are you feeling? What are things that are like, I guess, positive, where you're like, okay, now I'm in a good spot because of the way the car is feeling, either the way it's driving, or maybe the other cars around you are affecting it, or what's going on there?
Well, it was pretty negative when he was about that close to my door getting in the corner.
Right.
That's a move for somebody that, 2 things, doesn't care about if you end his day, because if I wreck, I'm going to wreck him. And 3, he's putting me in jeopardy of ending my race. So that's not good. So the positive thing was, when I cleared him, I got in clean air, and then my car started handling better, and then I drove away from him. So those are the things that I think y'all would be pretty entertained if y'all would listen one Saturday on your phone.
I didn't even know I could. Now I'm totally going to do it.
I'm going to do that.
I think y'all will be entertained, and watch on TV. And when somebody wrecks or somebody wrecks somebody else, go flip to that guy's scanner real quick and listen to what he's talking about. You'll probably be pretty entertained.
Well, this is good information. I'm kudos to NASCAR for putting that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I want more of that in other sports.
Yeah, I mean, our sport is more accessible than any other sport. I mean, you can't just go down and see Tom Brady before the game. You can come down and do that in our sport. And if we have in-car cameras, where the camera's inside the car, you can actually ride along inside that car for the whole race. On your phone, you can watch it. And you can be hearing the spotter going on as well. So it's really cool, the things that our sport has to offer. It's a lot different.
That's awesome.
That is super cool. Mike, what from your seat are you using, when are you using optics, and what are you using them for? Is it just specific times, or are you kind of just periodically looking for certain things, like, oh, I need to check in on this, or when would you be using an optic, and which optics come in most handy for you?
Well, it's racetrack dependent, and the big tracks, what we call the plate races, is Daytona and Talladega, the super speedways, the 2.5 mile racetracks. I'm in binoculars probably 90% of the time. At those races. With me, I just want to get close enough to where I can see and have the depth perception that I'm used to having with my own eyes at a 1.5-mile racetrack or a mile racetrack. So when I'm tight in binoculars, there, depending on where we're at track position wise, there could be a point to where I'm missing things as well. But you do have to use them at those tracks. Now, when you flip over to, say, the 1.5-mile racetracks, I'm probably only in optics less than 5% of the time. Just in it's situational, like on restarts where we're packed in tight together, because it's a game of inches. When he talks about me clearing him, it's literally to the inch, and I'm trying to do this from a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile away, and so there's spots on the racetrack, say maybe coming off of turn 2, which would be the farthest away from me, to where I would use binoculars there. You might use them down the back straightaway on a restart because we're fanned out 3 wide, so when you're fanned out 3 wide, you want to be able to get in there a little bit tighter. But once the restart kind of works itself out, you kind of relax and sit the binoculars back down, and they're primarily there in case you just need to see a fender rub or some type of damage or things like that. And then at the short track races, at the half mile, like a Bristol, I don't use them at all at places like that unless you do have damage. And that would be to try to report back to the crew chief as quickly as possible so they can start making up their plan of what they can do to fix the car, So it's a broad range of what you use the optics.
Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, when you start noticing something about the car that could be an issue, so obviously you're reporting things back to the crew chief, like you said. What types of things can they actually like change mid-race? You know what I mean? Like you can, I think they can change tires. You can go to like a different type of tire if the traction's gotten a lot different. Or I suppose if something is notably damaged, you could in theory replace that. I mean, or anything else, or
yeah, we have rules in place in that. But from my role, I'm trying to feed the information because Jeb can see more than the crew chief can see. The crew chief's sitting on pit road on a pit box, and he might have a TV monitor and timing and scoring in front of him, and he only sees Jeb come by for a split second.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not seeing hardly anything at all. So, I'm trying to get back to him to where I'm, seeing things through Jeb's eyes or through my eyes of what we can do. But, during the race, the tires, we put new tires on throughout the race, but we run the same compound of tires. So there's no difference actually in the tire.
Oh, okay.
But the crew chief can change the air pressure that's in the tire, which actually changes the spring rate of the tire because the tire itself is like a spring,
Yeah.
So the more air pressure in it, the higher the rate of spring that is, and then you also got, wedge that adjusts the cross weight that's in the car, which is the loads, from one corner to the next, because we basically break the race car down in 4 corners, the right front, right rear, left rear. So you can adjust the wedge, and then the track bar adjust the rear roll center in the car, and that's basically, changing how the rear end moves in the car because the rear end's real crucial to that, So we don't have a ton of in-race adjustments like we can during the week at the shop preparing for it. But those in-race adjustments can make all the difference in the world. And we're literally racing mousetraps. So we want to have the fastest mousetrap. But from my role, I focus on racing. I don't work on the race cars anymore. I haven't touched a race car in years. I focus on racing, what Jeb can do to be a better driver from green flag to checker flag. And this might touch on something that was spoken about earlier. Jeb is hyper focused on what can we do to make the race car better. But sometimes when we get hyper focused on what we can do to make the race car better, he might not see that even though we're having our issues, the car might not be perfect to his liking, but there's 3 guys in front of us that are having worse issues than us that are positions that we can gain.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to keep everybody focused on the right timing of things. When's the right time to talk about this? Because if we're not going to pit before the end of a stage, then we just got to dig, to get every position that we possibly can. And then when it's the right time to talk about what we can do to make the race car better. But if we can end up 3 spots better in the running order, when that time comes, then I feel like I did my job.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me an awful lot like the spotter. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people should be thanking spotters for arguably making the sport more interesting and progressing as much as it has over the years. Because if you didn't have that, then the driver's having to focus on all kinds of other stuff in the middle of the race, and that's distracting them from just being better drivers, making the car better, like you said. And your crew and everybody who's responsible for the car is kind of also, hey, wow, there he goes. What do we see? There's so much that you get from that bird's eye view. That's pretty cool. And, then you can do stuff mid-race and just keep getting better and better. That's awesome.
The level of communication from all sides, right? You know,
Yeah.
coming from Jeb, coming from Mike, coming from every which way. And like you said, I mean, you got information coming into both ears from different people, and you're trying to do
I think at
other
one point you
things
mentioned 3 ears actually that he has.
Yes,
I think Mike has.
I'd love you to explain that third ear. But I mean, it's just a ton of stuff going on. Jeb, like what types of things are you communicating like when you're in the car, as far as like, you know, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and things like that? And then are you communicating that to Mike, and Mike's relaying that, or you're communicating that to, or is that, I guess maybe that information is going to everybody?
Yeah, my information's going to everybody. You know, my job in the car is to go obviously as fast as it will go. But if the car is not working to my liking, like Mike said, I've got to do a good job to tell them what to do to fix it, because they don't know. If I tell them that it's loose and the car is actually tight, they're going to tighten it up. Well, guess what? I'm going to be tighter. That's my fault. I did a bad job telling them what the car's doing. So that is my role, is to figure out how to get the most speed out of what my car is doing and do the best I can, but also try to make my car get better as the race goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike can help me with that and say, hey man, I think we just need to be a little better here off the corner. You know, your entry speed and all that looks good. Like that information, I see a lot of it, but it's good to hear it too, to be like, all right, well, I don't need to focus on entry. I need to really focus on exit. I got myself in trouble last year for a race. I was too loose getting into the corners, but the longer I would go, I'd get tighter and tighter center off the corner. Well, I got them to tighten up the entry and loosen up the exit a little bit. So the first 10 laps, I was all over the guys. If they fixed it, it was better. But the longer the run went on, I got way too tight center off. So in the race, you're not going to make it perfect. You're not going to fix it. You got to figure out what part of the corner do I need to work on the most, and what can I deal with to try to make the car as fast as it can go.
Sure.
Yep. I think that's cool too. Like you were talking about, like, you know, when Mike says something and you're like, I'm seeing that too. That's probably just as important as anything else, because you're like, sweet, we're seeing the same thing. You kind of get that, I guess, that corroborative evidence, and you're like, okay, cool, we're on the right track, you know, and we can adjust from there, or not adjust, or whatever. So
this past weekend, for example, I went out on the track, and about lap 4, our track bar was actually cracking, so it was flexing a lot in the corner. And it was hitting my right tire, so it was knocking down. So I had a flat tire in practice. We'd go back to qualifying. I wrecked in qualifying. Somehow we didn't destroy the car, but we didn't help it any. And Mike could see that it was smoking, you know. So he's telling them, but they didn't catch it. So we almost destroyed a race car twice because there was something going on there. So Mike's seeing this stuff before it, you know, he probably knew, I knew, and he probably knew in qualifying, this probably ain't going to be very good when I left pit road, just because how bad the thing was smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Can you loose and tight? That's what you hear that a lot in racing, but can you provide like a brief, I guess, you know, definition of what those things mean?
So tight is I go down in the corner and say this is the amount of wheel input that I need. Tight is when I do this and the front tires just will not turn. It's like you're on ice and you're just pushing forward. It just will not turn, and the other guy behind you, here's me and I'm going this way. He's turned and pointed and he's going that way. Well, he's going to be faster because he's turned and pointed and he's making the straightaway longer. Loose is, you know, your typical, if you're on a dirt road and you're hit the gas hard and you're turning right, that's loose. And those things that we're talking about, the track bar and things like that, all of that stuff changes it. I mean, we're talking about thousandths of an inch that change all of this stuff. You could change a little bit in every corner. It changes everything. So you're trying to come up with a setup that has the most downforce, the most grip. So you're just doing this. The best cars are doing this. That's
just
what they're
a little
doing.
bit steering.
They're not turning right. They're not doing that. They handle good. You know, they handle good, and that's the speed. And that's what every driver wants. And when you get in one of those race cars, you look like Superman.
Yeah, the process to get there, just nuts. That's why we have engineers.
Yes.
Seriously.
To be honest, I wish, this new car that NASCAR's came out with, everybody has the same spindles. Okay. So everybody has the same spindles. They have the same chassis, where before, like with the Xfinity series that I race, every component the teams were building. They were building spindles. They were building the bodies. They were building the chassis. Every component was in-house, handcrafted, made. And NASCAR just got away from that.
Man, way more like Days of Thunder.
Yeah.
Right.
You're buying all the stuff now from NASCAR.
No, that will be interesting to see. I was trying to do a little research on the new NASCAR. It was pretty interesting what, a lot of the changes they did.
And those are new changes, right? I mean,
That's big changes. And, they got the charter system for the owners, and that the charter system's kind of like a franchise owner type thing. That's why you see Michael Jordan, Pitbull, and all these people in the sport now. The sport's booming right now. When you go to a racetrack,
oh yeah,
it's slam sold out. I mean, Daytona 500 probably had 200,000 people there. There's no other sport that I know of that has that many people in one location every weekend. So the sport's on the uprise, and that's exciting. And it's good to be in racing right now.
Well, hey, you never thought you'd say it, but thank God for Prohibition. Gave us NASCAR. You know what I mean? I mean, good thing we got rid of it, but hey, we kept the NASCAR
temporary.
part.
We kept the good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about those massive crowds. NASCAR is, like, at least in the States here, like the most popular type of racing from what I hear. What do you think? I mean, there's lots of different types of racing. Why do you think that is? Is it just the best, or?
Well, I think it's just blue collar, where it came from, and they did the best job. NASCAR as a whole took something and made it into a sanctioning body, and was the first to do it. And just like Mike was saying, he grew up racing at a little NASCAR short track, and that's kind of what we all did. And all of our goals is to make it to the top level. The NFL would be the NASCAR Cup Series. I mean, that's where it's at. I'm pretty much in college right now. I'm at that college deal. The next step is Cup, and that's where I want to be. But look, if I don't make it there, I've been lucky to do what I've done, and I'm still racing for a living, so I'm pretty lucky to be doing what I'm doing and talking to you guys. So it's been a fun ride, man, but we're not done yet, and we're going to keep trying to get to the top.
Darn right. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, NASCAR is it just is American.
It is.
I mean, fast cars, V8s, loud. I mean, I don't know. What
Jim,
more do you want?
Sounds like your perfect Saturday.
Yeah. You drive a Chevy car, right?
I do. Yep.
Thought I remembered that. Because there's pretty much at this point, there's just Chevy, Ford, and Toyota, right?
That's it. That's another thing I think you'll see in the future is more manufacturers coming in the sport, and I think that's
I hope so.
I think that's a great thing. The reason that's great is because it allows other teams to have some more backing. We don't have a lot of manufacturers now, and we got a lot of teams. So a lot of the manufacturers are spread thin on who they can help. So I think it'd be a great thing for the sport if we could get 2 or 3 more manufacturers in, and I think they're coming. I think in the next 2 years you'll see some more come.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that
nice.
Being super tricky, right? As a manufacturer, I mean, you might even see like, a team or whatever, and you're like, oh, this would be great, right? Like tons of talent, tons of experience, the right people, but like they're just you're already committed. You don't have more to commit.
What they always said was win on Sunday, sell on Monday. That was the motto back in the day, and that's when you had Dodge and you had Pontiac in the sport. So I think you'll see coming up, you'll see some more coming in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll only progress things further. The more competition you have, I think the better stuff gets. But I hope my Mopar boys come back in the game. I'm kind of a Mopar guy.
Yeah, Dad won the 500 with Dodge, so
yeah,
good deal.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be that'd be cool to see more people in the mix for sure. I think it would just make it more interesting, more competitive. You know, more people with skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I think that'd be fun. I like it
for sure.
Did we miss anything, guys? Jim, did you have any other additional questions?
No, I mean, I could go on forever just about cars and stuff, but yeah, is there anything about like this whole the idea though of like the spotter, maybe a bit of the unsung hero in NASCAR somewhat, but anything you feel we missed?
I mean, I feel like Mike nailed it. I feel like, it's a team sport, man. He does his part, I do mine. He's counting me down to my pit box going down pit road. That's a race inside of a race. There's a speed limit on that pit road. So I'm trying to maximize that and come in and out of my pit box like I need to. So it's a lot of moving parts in a race, and one mistake can ruin your day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, the one awesome thing about whenever we do podcasts like this, Jim, is I learn a lot, and then I get like super pumped about something, and then I have a new thing to be even more interested in. And
the only problem is, Mark, we've done like 400 some odd episodes, so now we have 400 some odd things to be really interested in.
It's really dividing my time.
Yeah.
But guys, because I'm so pumped about this, and I think probably a lot of other people already are, and hopefully will be after listening, where can people find you guys on the socials, on TV, Jeb? What are some upcoming races where people can watch both you guys in action?
Well, we're racing Phoenix this weekend. Not sure when the podcast is going out, but we race Phoenix this weekend, and then we race Atlanta following weekend, and then we go to COTA. That's in Austin, Texas. That's a road course. So that's the next three. My social media is Jeb Burton Racing on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then Crossroads with the Burdens is on the Sportsman channel. So that's been a lot of fun. Y'all been a great partner, and been a lot of fun working with you guys.
Yeah, guys. Gosh, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the insight. Super fun. And pumped to watch you out there. So good luck. Go.
Yeah, appreciate you having us on.
Very cool.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Until next time, everybody, happy hunting and shooting. Thanks for joining us, and safe driving.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.